The Strait of Hormuz is once again at the center of global strategic anxiety. In recent days, heightened military tension, damaged commercial vessels, and sharp movements in oil markets have brought renewed attention to this narrow maritime corridor. While it has not been formally closed, operational disruptions and security risks have already begun affecting global energy flows. To understand the seriousness of the current situation, we need to examine three dimensions: geography, energy dependency, and geopolitical escalation risk. Geographic and strategic importance. The Strait of Hormuz lies between Iran to the north and Oman and the United Arab Emirates to the south. At its narrowest navigable channel, it is roughly 33 kilometers wide, with shipping lanes in each direction separated by a buffer zone. Despite its modest width, this corridor carries approximately one fifth of global seaborne oil trade. Major exporters, including Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the UAE, rely on it to access international markets. Additionally, a substantial share of global liquefied natural gas exports, particularly from Qatar, transit this route. This concentration of energy flow through a single choke point makes Hormuz uniquely sensitive. Unlike diversified land pipelines, maritime choke points are vulnerable to disruption through military activity, mining, drone strikes, or even heightened insurance risk. Historically, choke points amplify geopolitical leverage. Control or even credible threat of disruption becomes a strategic bargaining tool. What has happened recently? Recent escalation follows reports of military strikes involving regional and Western forces targeting Iranian linked assets. Shortly afterward, several commercial vessels reported security incidents in nearby waters. Shipping traffic has reportedly declined as operators reassess risk exposure. War risk insurance premiums have surged, increasing operational costs significantly. Some carriers have temporarily suspended transit pending clarity. Importantly, there has been no internationally recognized legal declaration closing the strait. However, what we are witnessing is a functional disruption driven by risk perception. In energy markets, perception alone can trigger volatility. Traders price in future uncertainty, not just present supply loss. Oil market reaction and economic signals. Crude oil markets reacted swiftly. Even the possibility of supply interruption in a corridor handling millions of barrels per day introduces upward pressure on prices. Energy markets operate on tight balance margins. When spare capacity is limited, any disruption, even temporary, creates fear of imbalance. Higher crude prices cascade through refining margins, transportation costs, aviation fuel pricing, consumer inflation. Emerging economies are particularly vulnerable because they import energy and operate with narrower fiscal buffers. If disruptions persist beyond a few weeks, we could see secondary effects in freight costs and industrial input pricing. Military dynamics and escalation risk. The Strait of Hormuz has long been a flashpoint in Iran US tensions. The United States maintains a naval presence in the region under the principle of freedom of navigation. Iran, in contrast, views the strait as adjacent to its sovereign coastline and has historically threatened restrictions during periods of confrontation. The current situation raises several strategic questions. Is this a calibrated signaling phase or an early stage of sustained maritime pressure? Could miscalculation escalate into direct naval confrontation? Naval incidents carry high escalation risk because response windows are short and decisions are tactical. The presence of drones, missile systems, and fast attack craft increases unpredictability. Even without full closure, intermittent disruption could maintain pressure on global markets. Legal and maritime framework. Under international maritime law, the Strait of Hormuz qualifies as a transit passage corridor. Ships of all nations have the right of continuous and expeditious transit. However, legal rights do not eliminate operational risk. If commercial operators deem passage unsafe due to missile threat, drone surveillance, or regional conflict, traffic can decline without any formal legal closure. In practical terms, energy flow depends as much on insurance and security confidence as on legal frameworks. Global strategic implications. This crisis highlights a structural vulnerability in global energy architecture: concentration risk. Despite decades of diversification efforts, global oil flows remain dependent on a few choke points, Hormuz being the most critical. Countries have attempted mitigation through strategic petroleum reserves, alternative pipelines bypassing Hormuz, increased domestic production, LNG diversification. Yet none fully replace the scale of daily volumes passing through this corridor. Prolonged instability would incentivize accelerated diversification. But infrastructure transformation takes years, not weeks. Possible scenarios. There are three broad scenarios moving forward. Scenario 1: Rapid de escalation. Diplomatic back channels stabilize the situation. Shipping normalizes. Oil retraces gains. Scenario 2: Managed tension. No full blockade, but intermittent incidents keep risk premium elevated. Markets remain volatile. Scenario 3: Escalated confrontation. Direct naval engagement or formal closure attempt. Oil prices spike sharply. Global markets react strongly. Currently, markets appear to be pricing scenario 2: elevated risk but not full shutdown. The Strait of Hormuz represents more than geography. It represents the intersection of energy security, military deterrence, and global economic stability. Even without formal closure, uncertainty alone is enough to disrupt markets. In a world increasingly sensitive to supply shocks, this narrow corridor remains one of the most consequential waterways on the planet. The coming days will determine whether this episode becomes a brief flare up or a defining moment in 2026's geopolitical landscape.